Every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, long before the luxury mall opened its polished glass doors to customers wrapped in silk scarves and diamond-tipped shoes, a quiet figure shuffled in through the back-loading entrance. His name tag read Thomas, scratched slightly at the edges, pinned crookedly on the left side of his navy blue janitor's jumpsuit. His skin was wrinkled and weathered, the color of rich earth, and his hands, though now slower, had once lifted bricks, poured concrete, and carried the weight of dreams no one ever saw. The mall Crescent Palms Plaza was the kind of place that bragged about being invitation only for its grand opening 5 years ago. It was a monument of glass, marble, and snobbery, hosting stores that sold purses more expensive than cars and shoes that came with custom security tags. To the outside world, it was a symbol of modern luxury, but inside, it was a temple of egos. Thomas Brown moved slowly, but with purpose. He pushed the cleaning cart across the shimmering tiles like it was a royal chariot, not because it was fun, not because he was treated well, but because he believed every space deserved to be clean. Whether it was a grand ballroom or a subway floor, he picked up candy wrappers no one else saw, polished glass doors without being asked, and fixed squeaky hinges with tools he brought from home. He never complained. He never asked for recognition. And most importantly, he listened. He heard everything. The people of Crescent Palms Plaza thought he wouldn't. One chilly Thursday morning in December, as mall employees bustled inside with coffee cups and iced lattes in their diamond hands, Thomas was already on his knees in front of the gold-plated escalators, carefully brushing out gum from the grooves with a wire brush. Ugh, gross. That old guy still scrubbing floors like he owns the place. The voice came sharp and sneering. It was Valerie Quinn, the director of mall operations, a woman who considered herself royalty in heels. With her sleek bob-cut, custom-tailored suits and designer bags that cost more than most mortgages, Valerie walked with her chin up and her heart sealed shut. She didn't like messes. Not on the floors, not in the air, and especially not among the people. Thomas didn't even flinch. He just dipped his brush back into the soap bucket and kept scrubbing. Her assistant, Liam Dorsey, a fresh-out-of-college manager in training who had mastered the art of fake laughter and nervous nodding, chuckled awkwardly. "I mean, he's harmless, right?" "Harmless," Valerie scoffed. "He smells like old furniture and moves like a zombie. He doesn't fit the Crescent Palms image. These are luxury brands, not a soup kitchen." I think he's been here a while," Liam offered softly, trying to stay in Valerie's good books but uncomfortable nonetheless. "Too long. I don't care how long he's been working here, just make sure he doesn't cross into any of the showcase stores. I won't have guests thinking we let people like that near $10,000 handbags." As the day continued, store employees prepared for the Winter Luxury Showcase, an exclusive event that drew elite clients from across the country. All stores were on alert. Shiny shoes, clean uniforms, scripted greetings. Managers barked orders. Employees practiced their smiles. Security polished their radios. Meanwhile, Thomas wheeled his cart slowly past the high-end stores, watching. Quietly, he stopped by a cracked floor tile near Lumer, a French couture store known for $7,000 dresses and attitude thicker than the perfume they sprayed at the entrance. As he bent to inspect the tile, the boutique door slammed open. Hey you," barked a voice. Thomas straightened up slowly, his knees creaking as much as the tile beneath him. Sasha, one of Lumer's senior stylists, was glaring at him. "You're not supposed to be here. You're making the place smell like a thrift shop." He gave a soft smile. "Just fixing a tile before someone trips. We've got real clients coming in today," she hissed. "You need to go back to where you belong. Don't you have a mob to chase?" She was already gone before he could respond. Not that he would have said much. He'd heard that tone before, the first time he was 6 years old, holding his mother's hand at a grocery store in the 1960s. The cashier had looked at his mother's worn shoes and whispered to the bag boy, "Make sure they didn't steal anything." His mother had stood up tall. She didn't cry, but that moment stayed with Thomas forever. He didn't cry either. Not then, not now. Instead, he returned to his cart, pulled out a tool, and quietly repaired the cracked tile. By noon, the mall glittered. Every chandelier sparkled. Every storefront gleamed. But beneath the surface, something rotten was crawling through the walls. Pride, cruelty, and entitlement. Thomas had made his way to the upper level, near Valerie's office, to fix a leak dripping into a planter. As he reached for the wrench in his pocket, he heard her voice echoing from the glass office above. "I want that janitor out by the end of the week," Valerie said, her voice like ice over glass. "No pension, no warning, just gone. I don't care what paperwork HR has." Someone murmured back, likely Liam, but we'd need authorization from the board." "Then fake the paperwork," Valerie snapped. "Who's going to fight for him? He's nothing." Thomas quietly turned away. He didn't need to hear more, not because he was hurt, but because he now understood why he was here. What no one at Crescent Palms Plaza knew, what none of the laughing stylists, clapping security guards, or posh managers had even guessed, was that Thomas Brown wasn't a janitor. He was the silent majority shareholder and founder of Crescent Palms Mall. 20-5 years ago, Thomas had purchased the land this mall now stood on with money he'd earned from decades in construction and architecture, but he never flaunted it. He'd grown up poor, worked as a busboy, a carpenter, a bricklayer. He knew what real work was. And when he finally made his fortune, he promised himself something strange. Once a year he would dress in janitor's clothes and visit his own properties, not as an owner, but as a ghost, an observer, to see how people treated those they believed were beneath them. This was year 6, and this mall was his newest test, and so far, everyone was failing. At 4 p.m., a burst of chaos erupted near the central atrium. A child had spilled an entire milkshake near the velvet-covered winter showcase platform. Customers gasped, managers panicked, employees froze. Only Thomas moved. He rushed to the spill, pulled out paper towels, and knelt quietly. As he cleaned, the mother pulled her child aside, embarrassed, apologizing under her breath. Valerie Quinn arrived seconds later, high heels clicking like gunshots. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "This is what happens when you let their kind in." Thomas looked up, sweat on his brow. "Ma'am, it's all right. The kid didn't mean to." Valerie sneered. "Who asked you, Grandpa? Just clean it and disappear." A crowd had started to gather now. Phones came out. Whispers rippled. She raised her voice. "You don't belong here. This is a luxury event. You're dirtying the air we breathe." Then, before anyone could blink, she slapped him. The sound cracked across the marble walls like thunder. A sharp gasp rolled through the crowd. The janitor stumbled slightly, but he didn't fall. He simply stood still. Then he smiled. Not a smile of pain, not a smile of defeat, but a knowing smile, and for the first time, Valerie looked nervous, and that was only the beginning. To understand how this story would completely unravel the lives of everyone inside Crescent Palms Plaza, we must go back just 12 hours earlier, to the moment Thomas Brown put on his old Navy jumpsuit, pinned on that crooked name tag, and whispered, "Let's see who they really are when they think I'm no one." Crescent Palms Plaza was not just a mall, it was a monument. Everything about it was designed to scream wealth, exclusivity, and power. The parking spaces were painted wider for luxury cars. The elevators played live violin recordings. Even the air conditioning was infused with imported lavender oils from Provence. And at the very center of this glass and marble kingdom stood the mall's most prized jewel, the Valerie Quinn Signature Boutique, also known by regulars as simply the Golden Store. Its name wasn't actually golden, but its doors were, literally, real 18-karat gold-coated double doors that sparkled like a spotlight on the runway of fashion's elite. The boutique sold brands so high-end that even celebrities had to book fittings in advance, dresses sewn by hand, handbags that came with NDAs, and shoes flown in from Italy on private jets. This wasn't shopping, it was status worship, and Valerie Quinn, the boutique's director and general manager, ruled it like a queen seated on a throne made of contempt. She had built her reputation, not on kindness or brilliance but on control. Every detail, from the soft jazz that played from hidden ceiling speakers to the precise angle of every purse on the display table, had to be perfect. Her idea of perfect, clean, expensive, white. No one said that last part out loud, of course, but everyone who worked under Valerie knew it. The type of customers she welcomed, the kind she quietly pushed away, the ones she smiled at, the ones she smiled through. Valerie's mornings began with rituals, just like a temple priestess. She arrived at 8:30 a.m. sharp, walking past security with a nod that made them straighten their backs. Her heels clicked like a judge's gavel across the marble. She wore gloves not to keep warm, but to avoid touching anything not worthy of her skin. By 8:35, she was in her office, sipping espresso from her diamond-rimmed cup and reviewing the day's client list. Today's list was especially important. It was the Winter Luxury Showcase. The event she'd spent 2 months preparing. Influencers, diplomats, heiresses. She had handwritten welcome notes, designed signature champagne cocktails, ordered custom lighting for every fitting room, and in her head there was no room for mistakes, which is why, at exactly 9:12 a.m. when her assistant Liam Dorsey walked into her office with a frown, carefully curated mood shattered like cheap glass. There's an issue with the janitor again," he said. Valerie looked up from her tablet slowly, as if physically pained to acknowledge anything less than designer. "What now?" He was fixing a light above the display window in front of House of Fleur on a ladder during the window cleaning. Valerie's eyes narrowed. "During the window cleaning," Liam nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She put her espresso down with more force than needed, so a man in scuffed boots and second-hand overalls was visibly above our golden-laid window while Fleur's $18,000 winter gown was being displayed. "Yes, ma'am." He said it was urgent, a wiring issue. Her face didn't twitch. She didn't shout. Valerie Quinn didn't need volume to express her fury. Her silence was louder than any scream. "I want him gone," she whispered. Liam hesitated. "But he's technically assigned by corporate maintenance. We don't have jurisdiction." Valerie stood. "Then find a way. He's a stain on silk. This mall is a Monet, and I won't have him dirtying my masterpiece." "Do I make myself clear?" Liam gulped. "Crystal downstairs." Thomas was pushing his cart slowly toward the maintenance room, unaware of the storm gathering above, or perhaps fully aware and unconcerned. His fingers grazed each railing he passed, his eyes scanning chipped corners, crooked tiles. Things no one noticed but him. He paused in front of a large potted palm near the fountain. Its leaves drooped slightly, a few brown edges curled at the tips. Thomas bent down, pulled a tiny spray bottle from his belt, and gently misted the soil. He even wiped the dust from a leaf with his sleeve. Behind him, 2 teenage girls giggled. "Is he cleaning the plant?" One whispered. "Must be lonely, being invisible," the other replied. Thomas heard it. He always heard, but he didn't turn. If you had asked Valerie Quinn about brand image, she would have pointed to her team, a group of handpicked, sculpted, groomed, and instructed employees who embodied everything she believed excellence should look like. There was Marissa, the lead stylist with a model's body and a voice like a sleepy whisper. There was Julian, the personal shopper trained in Paris who said darling like it was punctuation. There was Ashley, the 22-year-old intern who came from money and wore more earrings than Thomas had in his entire cart. And then there was security Carlos, lean, tall, and too obedient. Valerie called him her velvet bulldog. He didn't bark, he didn't bite, but he always moved when she pointed. This was her team, her circle, her bubble. Until Thomas walked through the golden doors. At precisely 10:17 a.m., Thomas wheeled his cart toward the boutique entrance. He stopped not to go inside but to change a flickering ceiling bulb just outside the entrance. It was a safety protocol. He climbed the stepladder slowly, and that was when Valerie noticed him from inside. Her mouth opened slightly. Not in surprise but in pure offense. Liam saw it first. "I can tell him to come back later." "No," she said sharply. "Let's go." She strode out of the boutique like a general walking into a battlefield. Customers turned, associates stopped. The air itself seemed to shift. Thomas didn't look down from his ladder, not even when she was standing right beneath him. "Do you have any idea what today is?" she asked, her voice cool as a blade. Thomas climbed down slowly. "Winter showcase. Big day, ma'am." "Then why, may I ask, are you dangling above my storefront like a Christmas ornament?" The bulb was dead. "Safety hazard." "You're the hazard," she snapped. The words hung in the air like a slap. "You don't belong near this store. You're scaring customers." Before she could finish, a loud clicking of heels interrupted. It was Eleanor Worthington, an elderly but wealthy client with a known obsession for pearl-studded hats and rare handbags. She approached the scene, clutching her diamond-studded cane. "Valerie, darling, I must say, I love this new installation," she said, pointing to Thomas's cart. Valerie blinked. "The janitor. How authentic, how very... vintage Parisian train station of you, a working-class element. What an artistic contrast to the luxury." Thomas smiled slightly. Valerie forced a laugh. "Yes, of course. We're embracing diverse aesthetics." Eleanor nodded. "Brilliant. Keep him. It's like performance art." Valerie gritted her teeth. Inside the store, whispers spread. Associates peered through the glass. Some laughed, others frowned. And Ashley, the intern, whispered to another staffer, "He touches anything inside, I'm quitting." Valerie returned to her office, fuming. Her day had been disrupted by a mop and a smile. "Liam," she said, slamming the door behind them, "get security." 15 minutes later, Thomas was finishing up by the escalator when Carlos approached. "Boss says you're done for the day," he said quietly. Thomas looked up. "I've got 3 more tasks on the list." Carlos shifted. "She wants you out." Thomas looked at him. "And what do you want?" Carlos hesitated. "I just follow orders." Thomas nodded slowly. "That's what people always say until orders lead to trouble." He packed up his cart and walked away, but not before looking back and saying softly, "Don't forget to look in the mirror before you salute." Back inside, the boutique was packed. Music played. Laughter echoed. Champagne glasses clinked. And as Valerie toasted to a perfect day ahead. No one noticed the janitor stepping outside into the golden sun, pulling out his phone, not in anger, not in haste, just calmly. He pressed the contact named Lee Core board and said 5 words. "We have a culture problem." The sun had just begun to set outside Crescent Palms Plaza, casting long golden rays through the glass atrium. Inside, the mall glowed like a diamond, filled with customers who looked like they belonged in glossy magazines. The winter luxury showcase was in full swing. Laughter danced through the air, accompanied by the soft notes of a string quartet positioned just beside the main fountain. Polished marble reflected the light in smooth ripples. Perfume floated like whispers. Everything looked perfect, and yet beneath that polished surface something was cracking. Somewhere behind the mask of high-end perfumes, designer heels, and sparkling champagne flutes, there was rot, and it was about to be exposed. Thomas Brown stood just beyond the crowd, near the velvet rope that separated the exclusive lounge from the general shoppers. His cleaning cart had been taken back to the service room, and his gloves tucked in his pocket. He was no longer pretending to clean. He was observing. He wasn't invisible anymore. Not to himself, at least. He was simply waiting for the truth to rise. A young woman in a fitted red dress noticed him, standing silently near the fitting lounge, and raised an eyebrow. She nudged her friend. whispering just loud enough for others to hear. They really let anyone linger now, huh? Thomas turned slightly, nodded politely, and returned his gaze to the glittering lights above. He was watching how people behaved when they thought power only wore silken shoes. Inside Valerie Quinn's boutique, the champagne was flowing, and her confidence was soaring. Her team had already sold 4 luxury bags, 2 evening gowns, and several accessories all within the first hour. Valerie was in her element. She worked the room like a seasoned hostess at an elite gala, greeting clients with just enough warmth to feel exclusive and just enough distance to feel superior. As she walked past the front display, she caught sight of something or someone that instantly soured her smile. Thomas, standing, watching, breathing, her curated air. Her heels turned sharply, and within seconds she was outside the boutique again, storming toward him with the force of a woman who had never been told no. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. Thomas remained calm, arms folded behind his back, just enjoying the showcased map. "You are not a guest," she hissed, trying to keep her voice low but not enough to go unheard. "Your staff, your background. You're not supposed to linger where clients are." "I'm off shift," he replied calmly. "I don't care if you're off shift or off the planet," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You are not part of this event. Your presence, cheapens it." Her words cut through the music like broken glass on tile. A few guests turned, a few employees looked up, some smirked, others just watched. But Valerie wasn't finished. "You think because you fixed a few lights and polished some marble that you're welcome here," she said louder now, performing for the crowd. "This event is for people who belong." "And how do you define that?" Thomas asked, his voice steady. Valerie scoffed. "By how they dress, how they walk, what they carry, and frankly what they don't carry," she added, eyeing his worn-out wallet tucked into his pocket. The crowd was paying attention now. "Security," she called out, not to the radios but to Carlos, who had been standing at a distance. Carlos looked uncomfortable, but he moved. Valerie raised her voice further. "This man is loitering where he doesn't belong. Escort him out." A gasp rippled through the boutique floor. Phones came out, fingers hovered over record buttons. A manager kicking out a janitor during a luxury event. This was gossip. This was content. Thomas raised a hand, gesturing calmly to Carlos. "No need to touch me, I'll leave." But Valerie wasn't satisfied. Her pride was boiling over. The voice grew theatrical. "You know what?" she said, turning to the crowd. "This man just asked how I define who belongs here. Let me show you." She walked to the center of the boutique, gesturing grandly to the chandeliers, the velvet chairs, the imported French mannequins. "This is a space of refinement, a place where excellence is expected, where people understand value. We sell $25,000 dresses. Our customers sip champagne before they even try on jewelry. This," she pointed at Thomas, "is not part of that." Now the phones were definitely recording. Thomas stood still, silent. Valerie's eyes sparkled with superiority. "Look at your shoes," she said, her voice like venom laced with sugar. "Look at your shirt. Do you really think you fit in here?" Murmurs of laughter echoed in the boutique. A few employees chuckled nervously. One of them, Ashley, leaned into another and whispered, "God, she's really going off today." Valerie turned to the crowd again, drawing them into her performance. "Let's not pretend," she said with false politeness. "When someone like this walks in, everyone feels it. The energy shifts, the elegance dims. You can't polish a broomstick and call it a violin." Laughter again, now sharper, crueler. Thomas remained unmoved, but his silence unnerved her. She wanted a reaction, a crack in the mask, a retreat, something. Instead, Thomas simply looked her in the eye and said, "You're showing more about yourself than me." And then Valerie snapped, with her hand trembling not from fear, but from rage. She slapped him. The sound silenced everything, the music, the laughter, even the breathing in the room stopped for a beat. Thomas's head turned slightly from the force, but he didn't move. He didn't even touch his cheek. He just stood there still, strong, watching. Valerie's chest was heaving. Her eyes were wide. She was waiting for security to drag him out, for the final humiliation. Carlos hesitated. No one moved. And then Thomas slowly reached into his back pocket, pulled out a small black phone and held it up. The screen was still, recording the entire altercation, every word, every insult, the slap, the crowd's reaction, the employees who laughed. The silence that followed at his hand didn't shake. "I needed to see," he said quietly, "what this place has become when no one's watching." "But I was watching. I've been watching." Valerie stepped back, her expression suddenly unsure. "What is this? What game are you playing?" Thomas looked at her with eyes that held decades of work, of building, of surviving. "This isn't a game," he said. "This is your job, your values, your face behind the mask." And then he turned, walked toward the door, calm, steady. "But before exiting," he said one more thing. "I built this place to give people a chance, not a platform to look down on others. I'll be back with company." Then he left. The boutique remained frozen. Customers looked at each other. Employees glanced down at their feet. Some tried to sneak their phones back into their bags. Others whispered, "Did he just say he built this place?" Valerie blinked. He's lying, just a janitor with a phone, nothing more. Liam stepped forward hesitantly. Ma'am, I think we might need to call corporate. Valerie's eyes narrowed. Delete every video. Make sure this doesn't go online. But it was too late. Within minutes, clips had been uploaded, shared, circulated, the slap, the speech, the silence, and outside the boutique. Thomas was making one very important call to the people who actually ran the mall. Outside Crescent Palms Plaza, the late afternoon sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting warm golden hues across the parking lot and softening the sharp lines of the mall's towering glass facade. The light danced across chrome bumpers and polished windshields, but Thomas Brown didn't notice the beauty of the hour. His eyes were fixed, not on the sky or the sunlight, but on the numbers dialed into his phone. Each digit carried weight. Each ring was a doorway to accountability. He stood near a large stone planter by the main fountain outside, calm, still centered. The echoes of Valerie's slap still rang in his ears, but not as pain, as confirmation of everything he already knew, of everything he had already prepared for. The line clicked. "Mr. Brown," came the voice on the other end. It was James Carter, his longtime personal advisor and chief legal executive of Brown Global Holdings. "James," Thomas said, his voice steady, "I need the full response team sent to Crescent Palms, immediate deployment. It's a code black." James didn't question it. He'd only ever heard Thomas say code black once before in 2018, when a hotel manager at another one of Thomas's properties had thrown out a black couple on their anniversary because they looked like they were casing the joint. That incident had ended with a public apology, national headlines, and that hotel brand being removed from the Brown property portfolio entirely. "Understood," Sir James said. "Do you want security and PR too?" "All of them," Thomas replied. "I want Rachel Stone, Sarah Chen, David Kim, and all available members of the compliance division. Bring the ownership papers, and tell the board to be ready for a call at 6 p.m. James paused. "It's going to be a mess." Thomas looked back at the golden doors of the boutique. "It already is." Inside the boutique, Valerie was still vibrating with adrenaline. She paced across the plush white carpet of her office, the smell of citrus-scented hand lotion lingering behind her, like a trail of false confidence. "I want that video off the internet," she snapped, clicking her nails against her phone screen as she frantically scrolled social media platforms. "Call Liam, call marketing, call someone." Liam had already tried. "It's already spreading," he whispered, standing at the edge of her doorway. "There are 5 TikToks, 3 Instagram Reels, and someone just posted it on Threads." Valerie scoffed. "It'll blow over. We'll tell them he was trespassing, that he got aggressive." "He didn't," Liam said quietly. Valerie spun to face him. "What?" Liam cleared his throat. "He didn't get aggressive. He never raised his voice, never touched anyone. He slapped him." Valerie's eyes narrowed. "Whose side are you on?" Liam looked down. "I'm just saying, the footage is bad, really bad." She snatched her designer clutch from the table and stormed past him. "I'm not going to let some janitor ruin my career." At 4:42 p.m., the first of the 3 black SUVs arrived, then another, then a third. They didn't park in the VIP section. They didn't use valet. They stopped at the employee entrance. No fuss, no flair. But inside each vehicle sat people who had the power to rewrite policies, dissolve contracts, and replace entire executive teams in one stroke. Out stepped Rachel Stone, the razor-sharp director of human resources, her bob haircut as precise as her zero-tolerance policy. Sarah Chen, the coup, followed close behind, quiet, observant, already scanning the building like a battlefield. David Kim, head of corporate security, clicked his earpiece into place and nodded to 2 men in dark jackets behind him, and finally James Carter emerged from the final SUV, holding a black leather portfolio embossed with the Brown Holdings seal. He didn't need a badge. His presence was identification enough. They were not here to browse, they were here to clean house. Thomas watched them approach from a bench near the fountain. He stood as they came closer, nodding once in greeting. "Thank you for coming," he said. Rachel, ever business first, asked. "You sure about this, sir?" "We're walking into a public relations volcano." Thomas nodded. "Let it erupt. It's time people saw what's behind the curtain." Sarah Chen looked toward the boutique. "You want us to go in first?" "No," Thomas said. "I'm walking in with you." David Kim raised an eyebrow. "You want them to see who you are, as you are." Thomas looked down at his navy blue janitor's uniform. "They saw me as trash. Now they'll see me as the one who owns the building they stand in." At exactly 4:55 p.m., the glass doors of Valerie Quinn's boutique opened once more, and in walked 6 people, power-dressed in tailored black calm/cold, unshakable. Behind them walked the man everyone had just seen humiliated, shoved, and slapped Thomas Brown. Now no longer with his head down, now no longer with gloves or a cart, now flanked by power. The boutique went dead silent. It was as if someone had cut the music, muted the air, and frozen time. Valerie saw them, standing near the fitting room display, and her face twisted in polite confusion. "Can I help you?" Rachel stepped forward. "We're not here for a fitting." Valerie tilted her head. "Then what is this, a corporate audit?" "I didn't receive it." Thomas stepped past the group and stood in front of her. She blinked, took a step back. He held out a small white card, heavy, clean, simple. It read Thomas A. Brown, Chairman, Brown Global Holdings, Majority Owner, Crescent Palms Properties. The silence cracked. Valerie's mouth moved, but no words came. "I'm the man you slapped," Thomas said quietly. "But I'm also the man who built this mall, brick by brick, tile by tile, department by department. I created this place so people could find joy, not judgment." He looked around at the employees, Ashley, now pale and trembling. Liam, frozen in disbelief. Carlos, head down. "You used your position not to serve people but to strip them of dignity. And you did it to me," he continued. "Not because you knew who I was, but because you thought I was no one." Valerie stammered. I didn't. No, you were dressed like a mean. You looked poor," he offered, his voice firm. Valerie flinched. "I didn't mean, but you did," he interrupted. Then he turned to Rachel. "Please begin." Rachel opened a leather folder. "Valerie Quinn, effective immediately. You were suspended from all duties pending formal termination. You are banned from all Crescent Palms properties. All keys, passwords, and internal access privileges are hereby revoked." Valerie gasped. No, this can't be real. You can't just actually." "We can," Sarah Chen said firmly. "It's in your contract." Thomas raised his hand gently. "I gave you every chance. I stood here, listened, endured, and waited. But now, I'm done waiting." Employees stood in stunned silence. Some were crying. Others were frozen. Liam took a step forward. "Sir, I saw you laugh," Thomas said. "Not unkindly, but I also saw you look away. You knew it was wrong." "I was afraid to lose my job," Liam whispered. Thomas looked at him, and now Liam looked up. "I don't care. I'd rather lose it than keep it by hurting people." Thomas nodded once. "That's the beginning of courage." Ashley was already sobbing. "Please, sir, I didn't mean anything. I was just trying to fit in." Thomas's eyes met hers. "And did you like who you became?" She shook her head. "Then, let this be the day you stop pretending," he said, "and start becoming someone you're proud of." David Kim addressed Carlos next. "As head of security, your duty is to protect everyone equally. What happened today was a failure." Carlos lowered his head. "I understand." Thomas looked at him. "You still want this job?" "Yes, sir." "Then earn it back." "From the ground up." Carlos nodded, eyes moist. Then Thomas turned toward the customers. "You all came here expecting luxury," he said, his voice rising slightly. "But what you witnessed today was something far from elegant. It was smallness, pettiness, cruelty wrapped in silk." He paused. "I came here in old clothes not to test anyone but to see who we really are when faced with humility. You failed that test, but you've also been given something most people never get: a second chance to be better." And with that he turned, walked past the stunned faces, past the velvet ropes, past the broken image of perfection, into the heart of the mall he had built, not for the powerful, but for everyone. For the first time in over a decade, the glass walls of Crescent Palms Plaza reflected something other than luxury. They mirrored stunned faces, broken pride, and the quiet collapse of a kingdom ruled by fear. Valerie Quinn had always imagined herself as the crown jewel of this mall, untouchable, flawless, feared. But as she stood frozen near the golden doors of her boutique, that crown was slipping fast, and the entire court was watching. Thomas Brown's footsteps faded into the distance as he exited the boutique, surrounded by his corporate team, leaving behind silence heavy with truth. The slap that once echoed in arrogance now rang in shame. And the echo didn't stop with Valerie. It bounced off every associate who laughed, every guest who cheered, every soul who said nothing when cruelty unfolded right in front of them. Breath came in short, shallow bursts. Her face had gone pale beneath the layers of makeup. Her carefully constructed image Chanel blouse, red-soled heels, and all was unraveling. Her phone buzzed in her trembling hand. Messages from clients, news outlets, internal PR, even her husband, who had texted only one word: explain. She stumbled backward into her office, slamming the door shut. For someone who once commanded the attention of celebrities and CEOs, the silence from the boutique floor now sounded like 1,000 accusations. She looked down at her desk, where her framed awards mocked her: Retail Director of the Year, Luxury Excellence in Management, the face of customer experience. What face now? Outside the boutique, the dominoes began to fall fast. News spread like wildfire. Phones buzzed in employees' pockets. The footage of Valerie slapping the janitor was now being retweeted by celebrities, stitched on TikTok, and reshared by diversity advocates across LinkedIn. Even the mall's website traffic surged, but not for its brand. For the scandal. The video had a title now, dozens of them, entitled "Manager Slaps Janitor. He Turns Out to Own the Mall." She thought he was just a cleaner. He was her boss. When power wears overalls, watch what happens. Each view meant another person discovering the truth, and each share meant the public was learning who really had class and who only dressed like it. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't celebrating. He had no time for victory laps. In a private meeting room above the mall's main rotunda, once used for executive planning, he sat with his sleeves rolled up, his heart full, and his mind focused. Across the table sat his team: Rachel Stone, HR, Sarah Chen Koo, James Carter, Legal, and David Kim, Security. A large screen showed dozens of live security feeds, hallways, stores, escalators. But this wasn't about surveillance now. It was about transformation. "I don't want heads to roll just for the internet's satisfaction," Thomas said, breaking the silence. "I want reform. Deep, lasting change." Rachel nodded. "We've already suspended Valerie Quinn. Termination paperwork is being finalized. She's done more than violate policies," James added. "She's exposed a culture of elitism that we've ignored for years. This isn't just about one woman's attitude. It's systemic." Sarah Chen leaned forward. "Do we purge, retrain, rebuild? All three," Thomas said without hesitation. "We're not cutting rot, we're planting something new." Downstairs, Liam stood awkwardly at the boutique's front entrance, watching shoppers walk past with hushed whispers and pointed fingers. Ashley sat on the employee bench behind the counter, quietly crying, her makeup running. No one dared speak. No one dared pretend this day was normal. A knock at the glass door startled them. It was Carlos. Security badge clipped tight, expression unreadable. "Head office wants a list," he said. Liam blinked. "A list of everyone who spoke up," Carlos clarified, "and everyone who didn't." Back in the meeting room, Rachel opened her HR database. There were 5 employees who laughed, 3 who recorded the slap, 1 who posted it herself and then tagged the boutique. "Anyone speak up?" Thomas asked. One, Rachel said. Her name's Maya Patel, seasonal cashier, spoke out just before the slap. Told Valerie to stop. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And where is she now?" Rachel frowned. "Fired 2 weeks ago. Valerie said she was disruptive." "Get her back," Thomas said instantly. "Full benefits, promotion track." David Kim spoke up next. "We have 6 confirmed customer bans and progress those who are caught mocking, filming, or participating in the harassment." "Good," Thomas said. "Make it clear that we don't serve cruelty, not at this mall, not in my name." By 6:15 p.m. Valerie Quinn was escorted out of the boutique by corporate security. She didn't resist, didn't argue, she didn't even pack her things. Her assistant Liam watched from a distance, eyes wide. He had always imagined Valerie leaving the boutique one day, but in a limo, not under escort. The sight of her walking away, head low, eyes hollow, felt surreal. The queen bee had fallen, and no one was cheering. As she passed the luxury fountain near the center of the mall, the one she once claimed was her idea, she paused, looked at her reflection. The flawless makeup was cracking, the mask was breaking, and for once, there was no camera crew, no client, no intern waiting to fix her crown. Just a woman who had finally seen what her empire had become, and what it cost. Thomas returned to the boutique that evening alone. No security, no cameras, just him. The store was quiet, clean, empty. He walked slowly through the displays, pausing at the dress that Valerie once mocked him for standing near. A $12,000 winter evening gown. It shimmered under the soft lighting, but now it felt more like a costume than couture. He reached out not to touch it, but to straighten the tag. Footsteps behind him. He turned. It was Maya Patel, the cashier Rachel had reinstated. She looked surprised, nervous. She held a folder to her chest. "Sir," she said quickly, "I didn't know anyone was in here." "It's your store now, too," Thomas said gently. "No need to knock." She hesitated. "I just wanted to return the training manual. I heard what happened. Thank you for giving me my job back." "You earned it," Thomas said. She looked at him. "Why'd you come back in here tonight, after all that happened?" Thomas glanced around. "I came to clean." She blinked. "But, we have a new team already scheduled." He smiled softly. "Not the floors, the energy." And that night, with the boutique empty and the mall dark, Thomas Brown didn't walk like a janitor. He didn't walk like a CEO. Walked like a man who had seen the worst of people and still believed in their best. And tomorrow, he wouldn't come in with gloves, he'd come in with plans. The next morning at Crescent Palms Plaza felt nothing like the day before. Gone were the music, the champagne flutes, and the sweet smell of false superiority. In their place was a heavy, quiet silence, not of peace, but of reckoning. The golden morning light poured through the tall skylights, not celebrating luxury this time, but illuminating shame. And in every corner of the mall, people whispered. No one was laughing, not the employees, not the shoppers, not the security guards. Every word spoken now felt filtered through nervous eyes and hushed voices. It was as if the whole building they've seen its own reflection, and hated what it saw. They had laughed, they had pointed, they had whispered, smirked, clapped at a man they believed was beneath them. A man who, in their eyes, wore dirt on his hands instead of diamonds on his wrists. A man whose silence they mistook for shame. But now they knew, he owned the place. By 9 a.m. customers began arriving. Many came not to shop but to apologize. One by one, they returned. People who had witnessed the slap, the insult, the humiliation. People who had stood still. People who had cheered. People who had said nothing at all. There was the man in the gray tailored suit who had once laughed and said, "Looks like someone got lost on their way to the bus stop." Today, he stood by the boutique entrance holding a handwritten note and a bouquet of fresh lilies. He didn't ask to shop. He asked to be heard. There was the woman with red hair and glittering heels who had once whispered to her friend, This is what happens when you let just anyone in. That woman now stood trembling beside the jewelry counter, clutching her handbag like it was a shield. She asked for Thomas, and when she was told he wasn't in yet, she cried. There was even Helen Carter, the same elderly customer who had praised Valerie Quinn's cruelty, the same woman who called Thomas poor thing and laughed when he was asked to open his wallet. She returned that morning with her head low and her voice shaking. I didn't know, she said to the new boutique manager, her eyes glassy. I've spent my life here. I thought I was part of something refined, but now I see I was just part of something rotten. The new boutique manager, a quiet woman named Lauren, looked her in the eye. You helped make it rotten. Helen said nothing. She only nodded, cheeks red with regret. Meanwhile, in the staff break room, those who had laughed yesterday now sat with their heads down. Ashley, the once bubbly intern, no longer wore her Chanel brooch. She had pinned it off in shame. She sat, with her back against the wall, replaying the video in her head, her own laughter echoing behind the image of a man quietly enduring abuse. She had always wanted to be somebody, to belong somewhere beautiful. She had just never imagined that in doing so, she'd become ugly. I just wanted to be like them, she whispered to no one. Across the room, Liam was typing nervously on his laptop, drafting a formal apology. To corporate, every few minutes he would stop, wipe sweat from his brow, and reread the sentence. I failed to act. It didn't feel like enough. Carlos, the head of security, sat by the vending machine looking out the window. His hands were clasped and his jaw clenched tight. The night before, he had written in his private journal, I let fear of breaking the rules stop me from doing what was right. Now he stared at his reflection in the glass and whispered, never again. At exactly 10:23 a.m., Thomas Brown returned. He wasn't in uniform this time. He walked in wearing a plain white shirt, jeans and scuffed leather shoes. No bodyguards, no media, just him, the man, the builder, the soul of the place. And yet, as soon as he entered, heads turned, conversations died, and people stood. It wasn't out of fear, it was out of respect, not the forced kind, but the earned kind. Thomas walked slowly through the corridor, past stores that had once dismissed him, past employees who once scoffed, past polished counters that once treated him like furniture. He nodded to each person, never bitter, never cruel, just calm. Outside the boutique, he stopped. A crowd had gathered. Apologies waited in lines. Thomas turned to face them all. I've heard, he began softly, that many of you came here today not to shop but to speak. No one said a word. I appreciate that, he said, but apologies mean little if they're not followed by action. He looked around. Yesterday, I was reminded of a truth I've known since childhood, that people will often reveal who they really are and not when they think someone's watching but when they believe no one is. He paused. I gave this place the best of me, my heart, my labor, my vision, and in return I was treated like less than a man, not by everyone but by enough. Murmurs of shame rippled through the group. He continued. But here's what matters now. You have a choice, all of you. He pointed at the boutique. You can continue dressing like elegance and acting like rot, or you can rise. You can become better, kinder, stronger, not for me, but for the next person who walks in wearing old shoes. He stepped aside. I'm not here for revenge, I'm here for reflection. And for rebuilding. Then he smiled a tired, peaceful smile, and the doors are open. To everyone who's ready to change. One by one they came forward. Helen Carter stepped up first, her voice shaking. Mr. Brown, I'm sorry not just for what I said, but for what I didn't say when others did worse. He nodded. You still have time to say something better. The man in the gray suit stepped next. My son's learning about civil rights in school I told him about yesterday, and he asked me why I didn't stand up for you. Thomas looked him in the eye. And what did you say? That I failed, and that I will never stay silent again. Thomas held out his hand. They shook. Apologies poured out like long-held tears. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Some begged for forgiveness. Others just wanted to say thank you. But more than anything, people wanted to be seen. Later that evening, the mall held a closed-door forum for all staff. The lights were dim, the room was full, and Thomas stood at the center, not behind a podium, but at ground level. No uniforms today, he said. No titles, no name badges, just people. He looked around. This isn't about one incident. It's about culture, and from this day forward, this mall will reflect not just luxury but human dignity. There was a long pause. Then someone clapped, then another, and another, until the entire room was standing, not because they were told to, but because they knew they had to. That night, Thomas sat alone at a bench near the fountain, the same fountain Valerie once called her centerpiece. Now it was quiet. The water rippled peacefully under the lights, and Thomas, once mocked, once slapped, once called unworthy, sat quietly, watching, not because he needed them all to know who he was, but because they finally knew who they needed to become. The moon rose high above Crescent Palms Plaza that evening, casting silver light across the marble walkways and quiet storefronts. The mall had closed hours ago, but one figure remained, seated on the wooden bench near the center fountain, dressed now in his signature Navy janitor's uniform, not out of necessity, but by choice. Thomas Brown sat with a quiet expression on his face. In his hand was a worn photo, folded gently at the edges. A young boy, no older than 7, stood barefoot in front of a wooden house. Behind him, a black woman in a cotton dress smiled proudly, holding a mop in one hand and her son's shoulder in the other. It was his mother, Martha Brown. And tonight, he was finally ready to remember her out loud. She had been everything to him, not just a mother, but a builder of spirit, a gardener of wisdom, and the first real warrior he had ever known. They had lived in a small Alabama town where sidewalks cracked from years of neglect, and the only grocery store had a Colorad's Use side entrance sign above its back door. His mother worked at that store, not as a manager, not as a cashier, but as the one who came in at 4 a.m. to scrub the floors before the real customers ever walked in. She used to say, "Baby, people may step over you, but don't let them step through you. You stand. Even if you're quiet, you stand." Thomas remembered how she hummed gospel songs while she cleaned, how she made miracles out of cornbread and broth, how she stitched his clothes by hand with mismatched thread, and how she never once apologized for being poor. He remembered the day the store manager yelled at her because she had accidentally touched a shelf of imported oranges with a bare hand. Thomas had been there, just 7, hiding behind a row of cereal boxes, watching. The manager, a white man in suspenders, had called her filth. "You think you can walk around here like you own something?" The man shouted, veins bulging in his neck. His mother didn't respond. She stood up, eyes locked on the man, and simply said, "Not yet, but one day, my son will." Those words burned themselves into Thomas's bones. He never forgot them. Not when he was digging ditches during high school summers. Not when he studied civil engineering at night, after working on construction crews all day. Not when he saved every penny from flipping homes and patching roofs to buy his first small commercial building in Atlanta. Not even when bankers laughed at him, offering modest loans if he brought in a white cosigner. He built himself without shortcuts, and when he made his first million, he didn't celebrate with champagne or silk. He bought his mother a pair of comfortable shoes, and paid for her arthritis treatment. He never said, "I told you so." He just held her hands and smiled. Years later, after she passed away, Thomas stood in the empty field that would become Crescent Palms Plaza. It had been a dusty lot back then, nothing but dry weeds and discarded soda cans. But he saw more, saw beauty. He saw her. He made a silent vow that day to build something grand, not just for the rich, but for the kind, the hardworking, the invisible. But how would he know if it worked? How would he know if his creation honored her values? That's when the idea came to him. The uniform, not a disguise, a reminder every year. For 2 weeks, Thomas would wear the very uniform his mother once wore, not because he needed to clean, but because he needed to see, to feel, to understand. If his staff, his tenants, and his customers couldn't treat a janitor with dignity, they didn't deserve the crown jewel of his empire. And every year, someone failed the test. But not like this year. He leaned back on the bench, eyes closing. For a moment he could still hear her voice in his head, humming those soft tunes, saying, "Shine a floor so well, it blinds the ones who think they're above it." He smiled through a tear. A gentle knock on the nearby wall startled him. It was Maya Patel, the seasonal cashier he had reinstated after she was wrongfully fired for speaking up. She looked hesitant, holding a brown paper bag in one hand. "Didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. "I saw the light still on and thought you might still be around." "I never really leave," he replied, his smile kind. She stepped forward and held out the bag. "I brought samosas from home. Figured maybe you hadn't eaten." He chuckled. "You'd be right." He accepted the bag and patted the bench beside him. She sat down slowly, eyes wide as she looked around the empty mall. "It's weird," she whispered, "without the crowds. The noise." He nodded. "This is when you hear the truth." They sat in silence for a moment. Then she turned to him. "Why do you do it? The uniform, I mean." He paused, then unfolded the photo in his hand and handed it to her. She looked at it for a long time, then back at him. "She's beautiful. She was stronger than anyone I've ever met," Thomas replied. "I wear this to honor her, to remember where I came from, and to make sure no one here forgets where they came from either." She nodded slowly. "I hope I make her proud," he added. "You already have," Maya said, her voice trembling, "because yesterday, when you stood still while they all mocked you, I saw her, even though I didn't know her." Thomas looked down. "I just wish more people did." Suddenly his phone buzzed. A message from Rachel Stone. "The press wants a statement. They're spinning it as a PR nightmare. Want us to draft a formal release?" He stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "No spin, no press release. Just tell them the truth. The janitor owns them all and he's cleaning house." As Maya stood to leave, she turned and said, "We needed this, all of us, not just to be reminded who you are, but who we are." Thomas smiled, then whispered mostly to himself, "That's the point." That night, under the soft hum of ceiling lights and the quiet ripple of the fountain, Thomas Brown remained seated, in his janitor's uniform, photo in hand, heart full, and mission clear. He wasn't just cleaning floors anymore, he was cleaning legacies. 2 weeks after the incident that shook Crescent Palms Plaza to its core, something remarkable began to unfold. It wasn't immediate. It didn't come with headlines or balloons or corporate slogans. It came slowly, like spring thawing through a long, bitter winter, quiet, gentle, steady. It began with the way people spoke, how they looked one another in the eye, and how the walls of the mall didn't echo with arrogance anymore but with intention. Thomas Brown had not only restored order, he had started a movement, one that stretched far beyond the golden doors of the boutique, past the grand escalators, and into the hearts of every employee, customer, and stranger who walked through the mall. He called it the Human First Initiative, and it changed everything. That the first change came with policy. Every employee from janitor to boutique manager was now required to attend a compassion and empathy training program, built not from manuals but from lived experience. Thomas personally worked with Rachel Stone and Sarah Chen to design the curriculum. There were no boring slides or fake scenarios. Instead, people sat in circles. They talked, they listened, they shared stories, some beautiful, some painful. They saw each other. Before you sell a handbag, Thomas told the trainees, learn how to hold someone's story. The second change came in structure. Title hierarchy was flattened. Everyone wore the same name tag, first name only. Numbered titles, no roles, just names. Because Thomas knew what it was like to be ignored by a name tag, and he never wanted that to happen again. The third shift. The uniforms. Thomas had them redesigned. Every janitor's uniform now bore a patch over the heart that read, "Dignity is not a role, it's a right." He also added one symbolic detail that shook everyone. Every executive, including himself, was required to wear that same uniform for 1 day each month. Not for appearances, but for empathy, for memory. Humility, Thomas said in a company-wide email, isn't learned in a boardroom. It's found on your knees, scrubbing something someone else ignored. The boutique that once stood as a symbol of exclusion was completely remodeled. Gone were the gold-plated doors. Gone were the roped-off VIP sections. Gone was the cold, white decor that felt more like a museum than a place of welcome. In its place stood a warm, light-filled space with handwritten quotes on the walls. At the entrance was a wooden bench with the words etched in brass. All are welcome. All are worthy. All are watching. The new manager, Maya Patel, her first action. She placed a framed photograph on the counter. The same picture Thomas once carried in his pocket, a young boy standing barefoot beside a proud woman with a mop. Below it, she added a plaque in honor of Martha Brown, who scrubbed floors so others could stand tall. But the biggest change, it came from the people. Ashley, the intern once desperate to belong, now led the mall's new youth mentorship program, guiding high school students from underserved communities into business internships and scholarships. "I used to think fashion made me important," she said during her first workshop, "but now I know kindness makes you unforgettable." Carlos, the former security head who had once obeyed cruel orders, was promoted to Director of Equity and Inclusion. He now taught seminars titled When Obedience Fails and Courage Begins. His words were raw, honest, and often brought tears. Liam, who had once typed apologies on a laptop with shaking fingers, became the quiet engine behind the transformation. He redesigned HR protocols, ensuring every complaint would now be heard no matter who filed it or how they looked. And what of the customers? They changed to ... They no longer whispered judgments. They held doors for strangers. They asked staff how their day was going. They noticed. They smiled. Not out of guilt, but because the mall had become something more than a shopping center. It had become a mirror. And Thomas made sure that mirror reflected humanity. On the anniversary of the incident, the mall hosted a special event. No celebrities. No influencers. Just a gathering of staff, families, and guests all seated around a central stage where the fountain flowed peacefully. Thomas took the stage last. No spotlight, no suit. He wore the same janitor uniform, clean pressed, proud. He stood in silence for a moment, then began. "Last year, I stood right there," he said, pointing to the boutique steps, "and someone decided that because I didn't wear silk, I didn't matter." He paused. "But today, I'm here to tell you something. You don't need designer shoes to stand tall. You don't need a title to be respected. You don't need a wallet full of cards to belong." He looked out over the crowd. "You need decency, courage, and the belief that every person, regardless of what they wear, where they're from, or what job they do, deserves to be seen." Then he looked down at his own name tag. Simple and plain Thomas, no titles, no empire behind it. Just a man, a builder. After the speech, a boy walked up to him, maybe 10 years old. He wore a hand-me-down hoodie and scuffed sneakers. He held out a notebook with shy eyes. "Can I ask you something, sir?" Thomas knelt. "Of course. Were you always rich?" Thomas smiled. "No, son," he said. "I was born poor, but I was raised rich, with lessons, with love, and with the kind of dignity no money can buy." The boy nodded. "I want to be like you." Thomas looked into his eyes and said, "Then start by treating the janitor like he's the king, because one day he might be." As the boy walked away, Thomas looked around at the plaza he had built, not just in concrete and glass, but in heart. He thought of his mother, of the dreams she whispered while polishing floors, of the promise he had made to her in silence. And he whispered back, "We did it, Mama. We did it right." Crescent Palms Plaza still sold designer bags, still housed luxury boutiques, still sparkled with light, but no, it sparkled with something greater, with humanity, with humility, with hope.